Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. Today is July the 23rd, 2026. If you've been following US news, you will have noticed that a scene of the arrest of a police chief has gone viral. That's the arrest of the Pritchard police chief, uh, Walter Knight, and his other law enforcement accomplices. And recently, a special grand jury recommended that the entire police department of Pritchard be abolished, right? It's in Mobile, Alabama. They recommended that the entire police department be abolished and, rebuild a new one from scratch because virtually all the police officers were involved in the decadent state of the law enforcement. There was institutionalized corruption. They were all involved in crime. Now, it's not to report the police corruption. I've been doing videos talking about having been a victim of the Montgomery County uh, Police Department as well. That's why, I'm not in my regular job and I've started doing these videos. You can see those videos, but right now, what I want to do is address a video that's sort of gone viral amongst Nigerians, which I saw. It was of a young lady in the United Kingdom, and apparently she had graduated with a master's degree in the UK at a cost of £20,000, right, a year. And she was disillusioned, disenchanted that she had not been able to obtain um, work, you know, suiting her master's qualifications. Instead, she instead of being able to get work in banking or in office jobs, as she put it, she's having to do work that she thinks is unsuitable for her qualifications. Right? That's in the UK. Um, I thought he was a bit self-absorbed considering the hazards Nigerian students, right? Nigerian F1 international students suffer in the West, including America, right? I live in America. I'm an American citizen now, and so whatever I take, it's up. Whatever I say, it's up to you. There's no use for you to say, well, it's because you have your opportunities or you're there in America. It's meaningless because again, I'm an American citizen. I'm just trying to be helpful and to provide some kind of advice and guidance that many people don't know when they go and fork out £20,000, a lot more, because there's cost of living and everything, and you put all your hopes on an F1 visa, international student visa in the West, whether in the UK or in America. So, um, something else that Nigerian females are particularly vulnerable to in the West, also in America, is being raped. I apologize for having to be graphic, but maybe I should say it in a more mild, in a milder way, that they are victims of sexual assault or uh, as international students, and they're not able to report it, right? Because so people sexually harass them with impunity, right? People who have um, American citizenship, that might be their guidance guardians that they come in contact with. And I'm not just talking right from the top of my head. I'm talking from evidence because from what people have told me, right? I'm fortunate that I have female friends who've told me of their experiences, and this was like over 20 years ago. So the women, so today I'm going to narrate my um, the discussions I had with female friends, over 20 years ago, talking about some 25 years ago. And those women, fortunately, today, they're all married. They're all very successful, right? They're all very successful women. But just to let you know the cost of um, the price Nigerian young women have to often pay to obtain that uh, international degree from America or the UK, and to stay here in the West. So I don't know if the lady who, not to disparage her as being self-absorbed. I don't know what her situation is. She seemed very young, and it just seemed, complaining about not finding work that matched her qualifications, her master's qualifications. It seemed, the least of the worries that Nigerian international students face. So I don't know if she's gone through her own essay as well, and this was just another outlet, and some form of outlet. She was just diverting, um, her angst or whatever and it was just using the fig leaf of not being able to find work in suitable work that match her qualifications. But a reason that I was also bringing up the police department thing was because uh, imagine a Nigerian international student who's been raped and she goes to report it to the police. We have a situation where there's a corrupt law enforcement cadre that they fail to report. Um, they fail to properly report incidents. Uh, you know, they fail to properly investigate reports of crime. This Pritchard Police Department, it was found that 60% of sexual assault rape kits were discarded. 60% of them, they were never submitted to the Alabama Forensic Science Department of Forensic Sciences for testing. 60% of them. So women who had been sexually assaulted, who were bold, brave enough, right, through their trauma, they go and submit themselves, they subject themselves to testing, right, with the police departments, and only to only for their essay, the rape kits are, that they submitted, never to have been, submitted to the forensic science department for testing, right? So their cases, their reports, they're redundant. Nothing's done about their reporting their victimization, that they've been victimized through sexual assault, right? So nothing's going to be done about it, right? But in any event, I wanted to quickly talk about these three instances, three women when I was much younger, and these were women that I knew, that I was close to, and they told me of their experiences. One of them, the first one who ever told me, was someone I knew back home. I knew her back home, and we kept in touch. And then one day she called me. We were in different places. We didn't go to the same state. We were in the same school. But she felt comfortable, and one day, she called me and she told me what had happened to her. She had been, we weren't in the same state, so she told me that, her dad, for holidays, her dad had sent her to stay with his friend, his very good friend. She told me his friend's wife was a nurse, and so she went to work at night. And she told me how one day, while the wife was at work, because this was for during the holidays, she would leave her state and go and stay with them, because she couldn't go all the way back to Nigeria for holidays. It was a brief holiday. It was very expensive. So she said this guy raped her. She was a virgin. She was 16 years old at the time. Tied her up to a chair, raped her, tore her clothes. That he had alcohol. He asked her first of all to serve her alcohol. Sorry, to serve. He asked her to serve him alcohol, and she told me how she thought it was weird. But anyway, in any event, this is graphic, but just to let you know what parents send their daughters right? And the sort of environment parents send their daughters to, and what they're vulnerable to, the sort of harms and dangers exposing their daughters to, right? After, even though after forking out, such exorbitant sums, and you think America or the UK is utopia, it's El Dorado, it's paradise, and once you just pay that money for the international education, everything's just going to sort itself out. No, that's not the case. So she was raped. After she was raped, she took a shower, went back to school, never contacted the person again, did not go and report it to the police, right? I asked, why aren't you reporting it to the police? Why aren't you reporting it to your father, right? So that's how you learn women mature very quickly. They start thinking sharp at a very early age, much faster than guys. She was only 16 when this person raped her. It's a reason why many American colleges don't let young girls enroll, but, below a certain age, because um, they're vulnerable. They're very vulnerable to SA, sexual assault. So she was 16, and her explanation was one, he was her father's friend, and she said it would cause a huge fight. Her father would go ballistic, and she felt that everybody would end up blaming her. She was just 16 and she was already thinking of all these things, and everybody would blame her. But the most important thing for her was she felt that her father would call her back to Nigeria, would just end her education in America and recall her, back to Nigeria, and it would end the opportunities of her sisters as well, right? She never told me who it was. I asked who the man was, asked for his name. She never told me his name, right? So this is something she lived with. She's married, she's successful, she went to an Ivy League, and she's successful. So people you would never know. She's not the only one. I have another friend, this one was in school with me at that time. And this person, her own experience was she was staying with a guardian. She was staying with a guardian, and her guardian's son, who was younger than her, raped her, right? Because he used to help her, take her around, drive her everywhere. So one day he raped her, and and then he begged her after it, right? After he raped her, and then so she couldn't. Same thing. I asked, why aren't you going to tell your dad? Why aren't you going to tell someone? She wasn't going to go to the police because she didn't think the police was going to do anything about it. And by the way, something else for international students. Yes, if a young woman, just to show you that these women were not lying, because one, there's actually a special visa, right, in America. A woman who's a victim of sexual assault, through the U visa program, they report it to law enforcement. It allows them to change to legalize, have some kind of status that can now help them through becoming permanent residents, right, and eventually citizenship, right. If they've been victim of certain violent crimes, including sexual assault, but these women would not subject themselves to that, right? It was embarrassing for them, and they were certain their dads were going to just end their education in America and bring them back, send them back home, right? It would, you know, so that was that. And this person though, who was raped by her guardian son, she quietly had her dad change her school so she wouldn't have to confront him anymore. She changed schools. She as well. She's married, has kids. She's remarkably, phenomenally successful, right? They're very successful people, right? The third person went to a party, right? This was another friend, she went to a party, and she said somebody got her a drink, right? Got her a drink, one of the people that she went out with. And, she didn't know, she didn't realize anything. She didn't suspect anything, in taking the drink, because the person brought a bunch of drinks, bought drinks for the girls. She was in a group. But she said the next day, she couldn't remember anything, but that she woke up the next day in his bed in his home, and she was like, she doesn't know how she got there, and she knew she'd been drugged. A woman can tell when she's been sexually violated, so she knew that. So she told her friends, and her friends ended up getting the guy. The guy confessed that yes, he did slip a drug. But she didn't go to the police, right? She did not go to the police, especially now in these times, right? F1 students are being targeted, right? American citizens, like these different people were American citizens, right? American citizens are able to counter. You accuse them of one thing, they're going to come back at you and retaliate and say, well, you're delusional, or say you're some kind of criminal, and then the law is going to work on their side. You can see how corrupt law enforcement is, right? Like I said, the Pritchard police department in Alabama, they just arrested their chief of police, right? So that's something many people don't know. Parents, you're gathering, all this money to fund these prohibitive, this education that's, it's not worth it, right? It's not worth it at prohibitive costs. And the other sacrifices that your children have to make, sometimes they barely escape with their lives. Now, I want to also remind us of the case of Oluwatoyin Salau. She was a 19-year-old who was killed approximately June the 13th, 2020, the height of the George Floyd protests, right? She was a student. She was 19 years old. And sometimes, studying abroad when your parents are not with you, it can be very challenging, right? It can be very challenging. Sometimes you have nobody to help you. Even sometimes when you have family, your family can be abusive, especially, African family, because, they can't, back home, African parents can be very draconian. Not just, it's not just your parents who think they have rights over you, right? It could be extended family. It can even be neighbors, right? They think they can be your parents, right? But back home in Nigeria. And so you find that the communities here in America, sometimes young people are vulnerable to some of these people. So Oluwatoyin Salau found herself, she was a student, and temporarily, she had a situation with her housing. She was at a bus stop when this man, a black American man, offered to help her with a place to stay. He was elderly. She was 19. He was 49. She thought, okay, that he was being kind. People from back home, sometimes we see people who are generous and hospitable, right? That's not the same situation in America, right? I'm not saying all Americans are that way, but you've got to be very careful. America is a very different environment. The West is a very different environment, right? So I'm going to finish Oluwatoyin Salau's story. So this guy took her he deceived her, took her to his home, falsely imprisoned her, right? Held her captive for 3 to 5 days, and raped her for 3 to 5 days. He raped her. Eventually, he decided to kill her because he realized if she went to report, that he'd go to prison, and he didn't want to go to prison. So she was just disposable to him. A 19-year-old girl, Oluwatoyin, she had a family. She came from somewhere. So this is what sometimes when you're sending your young women, right, overseas to America, to England, to the West, to other nations, right? You're sending them, you're putting them in harm's way, right? There's another person who told me, went to another nation. She was raped by her friend. Sometimes it just happens. And they know international students are vulnerable, right? They're vulnerable. They know nobody's going to pay attention to international students, right? They know the police. You don't realize how corrupt law enforcement and certain institutions are in the West, particularly in America. You think, look, the biggest crooks are in America. You think Nigerians have fraudsters? Look, the biggest fraudster ever, came from America. Bernie Madoff, right? Over $65 billion in fraud. Ponzi, when you talk about Ponzi schemes, right? It's named after an American, right? Ponzi scheme. The biggest crooks are here, whether it's gangsters, whether it's serial killers, they're here in America. This is where you're sending your children to, right? You're putting them in harm's way. Stay in Nigeria. Stop, uh, you know, putting your daughters in harm's way, right? It's just a status symbol. If you want to immigrate, then all of you should immigrate together with your family. There's an avenue. America has such an avenue, but again, you can make it anywhere, right? Focus on transforming your environment back home in Nigeria, but the F1 international student visa, it's not the way right now. Especially, they're being targeted, right? And there are tons of Nigerian females who are raped, and the system, the law enforcement is not there to protect them. It's just going to mock them. I did a video talking about a Nigerian American female judge who was raped in a similar way. She was an attorney, right? And she was drugged by some guy. She went to the police. She went to reported it all over. Nothing was done about it. She's just ridiculed. She's humiliated, and she was even born here, right? That's a Nigerian American female judge, April Ademilui, and she's the one who, went on to report the misconduct of her fellow judges, right? And they only ended up retaliating against her and removing her, humiliating her, removing her as a judge, right? They fired her as a judge. So America is not what you think it is, right? There's corruption in Nigeria. There's corruption in it. There's more corruption in America, but they've been able to build a safe environment. They have safety nets. They have things that work, right? And the thing is, Americans are very proactive about their nation, and they try and hold their law enforcement and their public officials accountable, right? So they have tremendous corruption here as well. I know the challenges Nigerians are grappling with, they're a bit different, but every nation has problems, right? Don't think America is a paradise. America is not El Dorado, right? It's not a utopian society, right? We have a tremendous amount of problems here. And I will do more videos and just educate you on the sort of challenges that your international students, your daughters, your sons can face when you send them to America, which you think is a land paved with gold, but it's not. Something you have to keep in mind: Americans are the biggest marketers, right? If you want to say what nation has the biggest marketers, they can look. I was a banker, right? For years, I was trained, right? They're going to train you to sell ice to an Eskimo. That's how good Americans are when it comes to marketing. So Americans know how to market themselves, how to hype themselves. Americans, look, there's no free lunch in America, right? There's something they want from you, so they're marketing you to part with your money, right? Because Americans, they don't go to school like that anymore, right? Americans born here, they don't just keep going to school or studying the hard sciences. So they know that they can lure you to part with your dollars and do the education that they don't want to do. Look, I'm going to end this with this quick word. There was a young Nigerian, right? Young Nigerian. She was born here, but her parents, she went back and grew up in Nigeria and came back here. And so she became a recruiter. One day she called me and she was crying, and she told me why she was crying. She was really bothered. She said, look, they're enslaving Nigerians, Africans here. I was like, what does she mean? She's a recruiter. She said that there are these job descriptions, that there are these jobs that they give to Nigerians, and the description, they're doing 3 times as much as Americans are doing, right, for the same job title. when they hire Nigerians, they'll make them do a lot more. That's Africans, not just Nigerians. She's talking about Africans, West Africans, and they do a lot more, and then for half the pay. She was working for a recruiting agency. They hired people, and she was crying. She was like, "This is modern day slavery here in America." Here in America. So that's in response to the young lady who was saying, "Well, that's why is she? You know, she's got a master's degree. She paid her, £20,000 a year, and she can't get a job, that matches her qualifications, right?" So yes, it's a system. It's systemic. And you should learn more about the nations you're in. And so I'm going to do more videos to educate you about when we say there's structural racism, systemic racism. That's part of what it is, right? My name is Olurotimi Osha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.